so abstract. Yeah, it's complicated what you say, the way you act. Well, it makes me so confused. I don't know what to do anymore. Can't you just make up your mind? My heart drops when you play around. How can you be up when I'm down? Don't wanna think about it right now. Maybe you just wanna be friends, but there's a fight when we are talking. Maybe you just wanna pretend, but I can read between the lines. Even if I can't deny that all the things you said are hurting, still wanna be with you. I think you want it too. 'Cause baby, I don't wanna be.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live chat. I was just trying to read through the comments, but I'm happy to be here. So, my name is Aditi, and I am from India. And I love creating, I love card making. And if you've had a chance to see my class at Card Maker Success Summit, it is all about creating mini slimline cards with the Lindy's Gang sprays, some alt new products, some embossing folder techniques, and making quick and easy cards that you feel happy about. Plus, you can just, work at one stretch, spraying, creating your background papers, and putting together cards easily. So thank you so much, whatever I'm seeing. Thank you that you love my cards. Thank you very much. And I love sharing them. I love sharing these different techniques. And I am also a certified alt new educator, and I teach monthly workshops. I do a lot of card making classes and workshops, and everything is on my website. So it's aditimahajan.com. And when you go under courses, you will find all the details there. We have some upcoming collaborations and workshops and exciting stuff. So all the information is up there on my website. So, as far as this class goes, I am happy to just interact with you all, answer any questions that you may have. And let's see. So, the first question: what is the black ink that you use to splatter at the end, and what size paintbrush? Okay, I use acrylic inks. And the one that I used for the black is a Liquitex acrylic ink. And I use a size 3 or 4 at the max for splattering. I hope that helps. And it also depends on the distance your paintbrush is. If you're too close or further up, it gives you different splatters. And people who come to my workshops know we specialize and we focus on splatter techniques for like an hour altogether. So there's a lot to splatter. I hope that helps you. Are you using watercolor paper, plain cardstock? Yes, I have used watercolor paper simply because I was working with Lindy's Gang sprays, which are kind of like watercolor pigment. And so all my layers are on watercolor paper. So that should help. I do use Lindy's Gang on cardstock as well, but then I make sure that I'm using like at least a 250 GSM to 300 GSM cardstock. But you get different results depending on the paper you use with the sprays. With watercolor paper, they flow. With cardstock, they are going to kind of get soaked in, stain the back of the paper. So that's something you need to remember. Splatter. I see a lot of questions about splatter. Yes, I love splatter. What would you suggest if we don't have an embossing folder? So if you just want a simple background texture, of course, this was with embossing folder. I also love heat embossing, just stamping an image, a background stamp maybe, and heat set that with white or clear embossing powder, and that creates a very good resist effect for the sprays. So instantly creating quick and easy backgrounds. If you don't have that too, and you could just leave it plain, just spray, leave it plain, and leave it at your focal point. So you don't necessarily have to have that texture. This was just my easy way of using the embossing folders. So hope that helps and answers your question. Aditi, what is your preferred paper and weight to use for embossing? And do you think it's better to spray with water? Okay, so again, this was watercolor paper, and my watercolor paper that I used for these cards was about 200 to 250 GSM, if I remember correctly. So that was thick enough, and I got a very beautiful effect with the embossing, and I didn't spray it with water. But when I'm using cardstock, I definitely, like I said, I work with a 290 GSM to a 300 GSM cardstock, and I use that for all my embossing needs. But when it's regular cardstock, I definitely do spray it with water and just mist it, not soak it, just mist it with water and then emboss it with an embossing folder. Hope that helps. What is an embossing folder? That's a very good question, Patricia. So a lot of these craft pans, they create, I don't have, sorry, an embossing folder to show you, but they create folders with designs, and it's made of like acrylic sheets. And when you put a paper in it and sandwich it between an embossing folder, it has two sides. One is a debossed and one is a raised side with the design. But when you sandwich a piece of paper in that and run it through your die cut machine, of course, you have to switch your platforms to the platform that works with embossing folders. It gives you the design raised up. So you see this poinsettia embossing folder here. When I ran that through the embossing folder, this was the design, and it just raised and gave me a nice embossed textured look to my paper. And that's what I've done on the backgrounds here. So I hope that answers your question. Do the sprays resist the ink you blended over the top? I wondered why the green ink didn't cover the spray ink up. I am not sure if I understand that question correctly. So if you could just be a little more specific. I mean, I didn't spray. If you know why I have lighter areas at some places and darker, it's because when I'm spraying, I'm not going evenly, and so the white of the paper does show through at a few places, and at a few places, it's more blobby and darker. But I love that look because it adds to the organic feel. Apart from that, I only used gold pigment ink over this particular raised surface, and that still stands out. Maybe you can't tell on camera that well, but it does show through. The gold on those raised poinsettias does stay on the surface, even though I had sprayed with Lindy's. So if that's what you meant, I hope that answers the question. Oh, what colors? Okay, you will not believe this, but I'm just going to quickly show these to you. This is the first time ever in my life that I have used traditional red, gold, and green for holiday cards. I never ever use this color palette. I love using purples and pinks and silver. That was what I'd used last year in my holiday card making class here with Card Maker Success Summit. So I love using offbeat combos. Another favorite combo of mine for holiday cards is turquoise and brown, the combination between the blue and brown. I love that. So pinks, purple, silver, browns. I also like to go a little earthy with oranges and browns. That's another favorite combination. So this is the first time I've actually gone ahead and used red, green, yellow, and I thought it would be a good fun class with that. And just hi everyone, as you're coming in, I see a lot of people joining in. The thick watercolor paper works wonderfully in the dry embossing folders. I have had no issues. I mean, like I said, it's about a 250 to 300 GSM paper. It nicely embosses without giving me cracks on the paper and creates a nice embossed impression. Of course, I did, depending on the machine you use, because I have a big shot and this was a Spellbinders 3D embossing folder, I did have to go over about 2 or 3 times back and forth to get a nice impression. But then again, I don't know if that's just me convincing myself that yes, when I go 2 times, I'm getting a better impression. But I make sure to go, one way and then return back in the die cutting machine, just thinking I get a better impression. So it works wonderfully well. Uh, You're inking. How do you only keep the ink on the embossed portion? Oh, so there are several techniques, Joyce, when you're using embossing folders, and I always say try it out, test it on scrap piece of paper. Sometimes you get a lovely result by adding ink on the debossed side of the embossing folder and running that through your embossing machine. And sometimes you get a different, better effect when you've rubbed ink on the embossing folder on the embossed side. So it's trial and error. It's very difficult to explain that without having an embossing folder handy. But the technique is to rub your ink directly on the inside of your embossing folder and then add your paper and run that through the machine. So you get a look. So I would say try it out on both sides, inking both sides of the embossing folder and seeing which effect you like better. So that should answer your question. What blanking? Yes, I used acrylic ink and I use Liquitex. There is PH Martin, there is Daler Rowney. Any acrylic ink, that's what I use for my black and white splatters always. I have tried out multiple mediums, but I find acrylic ink to stay true to the color, true to the texture, and stay bold and nice on the surface. I just got a big shot. I have some embossing folders. Should you always miss the paper? Either water first. Okay, I do it both ways, Cheryl. Depending on the paper, like I said, with watercolor paper, I have not misted it with water. I've directly run that through my embossing folder. With my cardstock, I like to mist it with water on one side. That really helps and makes sure that my paper doesn't crack. Again, it depends on the paper GSM, the thickness of the paper that you're using. It's again trial and error. And what how I arrive at my trial and error, just cut smaller scrap pieces of paper and try it out. Run different papers, one without spraying it with water, one with misting it with water. See which result is the best. So you'll have to do a little play, and then behind with a pen, just make note of what you did, so that next time you remember that this is what you did, this was the GSM of the paper, this is how it worked. So I think that would really help. Yes, I do. I have a lovely collaboration event. So there is Joy D'Souza, who's also teaching another class here at Cardmaker Summit. And both of us love using color in a bold, vibrant way. So we have a workshop using alt new products called Color Explosion happening on August 24th. And all the details are on my website. So if you go to aditimahajan.com, head over to courses, it will redirect you to my courses website, which is createwithaditi.graphy.com, and you can sign up for that workshop right there. It's a 4-hour workshop with 2 individual classes and 1 collaborative session, where in the individual classes we're playing with inks and ink blending, and in the collaborative session we'll be playing with watercolors. So I hope that anybody who's interested would enjoy that. Thank you, Pam. um, Everything around me inspires my color choices. I think I always say this. India is filled with color, and the culture right here. It's just amazing. I see color all around me. My curtains, my dresses, the fabric, everything inspires me. Plus, I started off with mixed media. So, for a while, I did card making, jumped to mixed media, and that has just given me a better understanding of colors, a better understanding of what color works with what blend works, what blend doesn't work. And for that reason, I reached where I have with color. So I look around my environment for colors. Sometimes, like I said, I'm inspired by the bed sheet print, by the curtain print, somebody else's fabric. Plus, I don't know, color just flows. So I see color like when I close my eyes, colors come to me. So it just happens very intuitively and naturally. Without an embossing folder, like another way, Barbara, if you want a raised effect, that's something which will take a little time, but you still get a raised textured look. If you have die cuts, just die cut some elements and glue them in your background. So that way, that element, say if you have a poinsettia die cut or a leaf die cut, maybe die cut that two times, glue it together, and then glue it on your card base, and that creates a raised embossed textured look, which again gives fabulous and stunning result. I love doing that too, by the way. So that's something I enjoy. Do you heat set your stamped images before watercoloring? Yes, Liz, I love doing that depending on the ink. Now, in this case, with my elements, the stamped elements, the poinsettia and the leaf, I didn't emboss them because I was adding minimal color and I had enough time for my ink, the outline ink, to dry before I added paint. But generally, when I'm watercoloring, I love adding clear embossing powder or just embossing the outline because it really helps. If I'm going for a if I'm going for a no line watercolor look, then of course I won't do it, but most often I love doing that. Oh, sparkle to my cards, Pam. I love using glitter. I love using sequins. I love using gemstones. I also love adding, like, just glossy accent and then sprinkling glitter over it. I use a lot of embossing glitter too from Wow, and that adds the perfect shine and shimmer. Plus, if you're working with Lindy's like I did here, these are the Starburst sprays. So they come with that shimmery mica, which adds that sparkle and bling to the card. So it depends on the products I'm playing with, but bling is always there. No particular preference, Liz. Some cards I feel like need that sparkle and shine, so sequins. Some cards I feel like I can do with the enamel dots. So enamel dots, it's not like I prefer one over the other. It's about the card that I've created. If it's a more of a clean and simple card like the ones you saw at Inkathon with the alcohol inks, those were more clean and simple cards, and I thought enamel dots were perfect for those cards. But here, outrightly, there's shimmer through and through, so gold sequence was that perfect bling for these cards. So it depends on the card I'm making, it depends on my mood that day. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yes, everything, all the layers. So this is the background layer. The green layer that you see was watercolor paper, and then even the red layer was watercolor paper embossed with the embossing folder and then sprayed with the Lindy's. So since I was working with Lindy's, like I said, even my poinsettias, I stamped them on watercolor paper. And if you want a smoother look, then use hot pressed watercolor paper. If you want a more textured look, then I would say use cold pressed watercolor paper. That's the basic difference between those two. My favorite ink blenders are the alt new ink blenders. I absolutely love them, and I use the mini blending brushes a lot. I use the small blending brushes, of course, but the mini blending brushes I find are my go-to blending brushes, and that's what I use the most. So I hope that answers that. It was unclear. Yes, I was just trying to wipe off the brush with my left hand, smoothen the bristles. That's absolutely right. And sometimes to blend out the color, I have a brush in both my hands. I add color with one hand and then I try to blend it out with the other hand. But most often, it's just me removing any excess color and smoothing the bristles. That's about it. Nothing fancy there. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. And I do see there are a few more questions, so I will definitely answer your questions in the chat. But thank you for popping in. I hope you enjoy the class and other classes. And definitely do visit my website, aditimahajan.com, to check the courses section and sign up for upcoming classes. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the summit.